All right. So what's going on, guys? So for this week, we have Brendan Fury on again, or Furry. I always want to say Fury. So we got him on today, and we're going to continue the conversation. And specifically, what we're going to talk about today is just digging into how to actually prepare and maximize your chances of making a team when it comes to tryouts. The reason I want to talk about it is because all the guys I'm working with are probably going to be trying out for teams at some point. If not, most of the guys are doing it right now. And the biggest mistakes I see are very common mistakes. So it's not like one player will do one thing and then it's a completely different thing for the next. A lot of times it's dealing with the same kind of challenges, wondering the same kind of questions. And so that's why I wanted this conversation to be really focused on that. So that's what we're going to dig into today. But before we get into that, what I wanted to kind of check in is, Brennan, I know that you are currently kind of preparing yourself for what I believe is jumping into the, like, trying to crack an NHL lineup right now, which I think is a super, super exciting and really cool thing that I think lots and lots of players want to know about. So I'm curious, like, what are you kind of working on? How are things going? And I just want to kind of like check in generally to start.
Yeah, absolutely. Exciting stuff right now. I always enjoy the off season because it's time for you to develop and get better as a player. So I guess right now I'm just skating and working out, really working out kind of tough. I just really pushing myself, working on different things and trying to get stronger, faster, more explosive, different things like that. But I work out 5 days a week and I'm on the ice 3 times a week. Really trying to just work on individual skills and skill sets that I think I can grow on in my game and kind of really like, we're about a month away from the season now. So we're really starting to get close to that ramp up time where we're starting to really start to get the peak, and we're going to try to reach our peak. And so, yeah, like right now we're kind of getting to that point where everything's starting to ramp up a little bit and the workouts are getting a little bit more intense and starting to work on some speed and some power and really trying to get the legs, get the body ready to go come training camp here in September. And and then on the ice, just working on little individual skills I think I needed to get better at. And I think just to get into a little bit of specifics is goal scoring for me. It's a huge step I want to take this year as a player. So I'm really trying to work on that and build my confidence on the ice with shooting pucks every day off the ice and different things like that. But overall, the training's training and it's been pretty good. So I enjoy it and I enjoy waking up every morning and getting better.
I love it. And I'm curious to know, like, is there anything specific that when you say like working on scoring and trying to kind of dig into that and also like the peaking phase of the workouts? I'm kind of curious because a lot of times I'll hear guys say like, I'm kind of in this phase, like I'm trying to accomplish these things, but I'm kind of curious, like, what does that kind of look like right now?
Yeah, so let's take the workout. Let's go to the off ice first. Your off ice training, you got to really, if you have the opportunity to work with someone that understands it and understands your body and is able to understand the science of how a hockey player's body should work and I'm fortunate enough to have that opportunity and I kind of have it all laid out there for me. But I guess a brief little, layover of it all is usually you go into your recovery mode at the end of the season, and then you go into your strength training. You try to build that muscle that you broke down all season, and you really try to build that back up, get that strength back, add the weight back on that you may have lost during the season. And then once you build that up, then you really start to look for that power, which is a little bit of like weighted movements with some speed, like mixed. And then once you get that kind of down and you like work on that for a couple weeks or a month or maybe so, then you really start to go to the speed part. And that, I believe, like the speed and the off ice workouts, I think is something that is overlooked. And that was a huge thing I noticed for me when I was developing, and I was a late bloomer. I didn't really boom until I was 18. And I think the biggest thing I noticed was like my workouts changed from just going into the gym and weightlifting, trying to get stronger, to like actually understanding my body and then changing my workouts from just, like I said, lifting weights to, okay, we're going to use bands now. We're going to try to get more explosive. We're going to do more fast twitch movements and really trying to develop those muscles. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. We're in the speed part and I'm really trying to just elevate my speed and my legs and my power and trying to get faster. So that's like kind of what we're doing in the weight room right now. And then on the ice, we really dial in, like I want to score more goals this year. It starts out with, I think, keep building that confidence a little bit of maybe it's just sitting in the shooting room and shooting 200 pucks a day. at the same target, and then trusting yourself, okay, I know I can hit this spot 200 times in a row or 150 out of 200. Like, building that confidence, like, okay, when I shoot, when the puck comes off my stick, I know where it's going. And then replicating that on the ice when you're doing drills and when you're practicing, you're shooting for those spots, and it's not just out there just shooting and like warming up the goalie or something like that. Like, you're going out there, you're trying to score, and like when you do score, it's just because it's in the summer doesn't mean like it doesn't count. Like, I think when you score goals and you score goals in practice, it's always a good feeling to score goals. So when you can do that, it kind of builds that confidence and gives you that little interior feeling like, oh, that was a nice shot, that went in, or hey, it might have not have been the best shot, but I still shot it and it went in. Like, and it's just like these little things that you can kind of compound on and start to build that confidence in the summer. And that's something that I've like I said, I'm still working on other parts of my game, but I'm really like trying to dial in on that confidence part and really trying to develop that aspect of my game.
Yeah, that's cool. And the way I would kind of describe what you're doing with the shooting stuff is you're kind of using feeling and emotion to kind of program that side of your performance. And it's such an interesting thing that players will ask, like, what can I do to improve scoring? It's oftentimes most guys are doing the cliche stuff, and that's why I kind of wanted to push past that a bit, because it's the obvious of like, and we all hopefully everybody listening to this knows, like, you have to actually do the reps. Like, that is a absolute non-negotiable to get better. But when it comes to what you're actually doing in those reps is the thing that's going to lead you to either kind of continue on the same path you are and maybe get a little better, or create like an actual gap. And like that's the stuff you're highlighting there, which is it's paying attention to, okay, I'm not just trying to score, but instead it's when I do score, I bring in the emotion. I actually am treating it like I just scored more so in a real game, as opposed to what a lot of guys do, which is they score and they're like, whatever, doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah, and you have to like embrace that. I think that's a part of the game, and you really have to understand that, like, it's the more levels you go up and continue to climb that ladder, it is harder and harder and harder to get your number on the score sheet. Like, it's tough, either whatever it is. And so any way that you can contribute on the score sheet's always, unless you're in the penalty box, but let's not. But like, offensively, if you can have that number and like, yeah, start to build that confidence, like, oh, okay, like that was a good play, or that was a really good shot. I remember, just a quick little like example is, one of the days I was out there, and I mean, I was hitting every shot. It's like going in, hitting my corners, hitting my spots. And it's like, wow, this feels good. Like, I feel good. I want to keep shooting. Like, I wanted to stay on the ice, like, after our time was up. And then like there was another day where I don't think I hit one spot, or nothing felt good. Nothing felt smooth. But at the end of the day, I was like, I still went out there and I know I got better, and I still kind of like made the bad into the good from that day. And like knowing that, okay, like I didn't do what I wanted today, but I still did what I wanted to do, and like I got better, and I took that negative into the positive. And I think any time you can, like, yeah, like you said, like take that emotion of the game and kind of, like embrace it and soak it in, and not just going out there and just like, oh, it's summer, I just want to get my puck touches. Like, when you're out there, you actually like just enjoy it, and like soak that feeling of, all right, I got better today. And that's on and off the ice. Like, when you're leaving, if you don't skate that day and you're leaving the gym, it's like, okay, wow, like, yeah, I pushed myself, I got better. Like, it wasn't just like I just got a workout in today, I'm good. Like, no, like I worked hard and I got better. I like to have that mindset in the summer.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and it almost sounds like you're kind of like building up like a memory bank of all these times where you can look back to, oh yeah, I remember feeling so good after that workout or that skate. And it's interesting because I actually can think back to times where I would leave like a skating session and I wouldn't have that time after to be intentional. And I can distinctly remember now, thinking about it and kind of reflecting, there's such a difference when you say, I know I did what I could to get better, and you kind of use that emotion to kind of program that as a memory, as opposed to simply just, letting it be like, whatever, I showed up, cool. Because it's such a big difference when you think back to 100 quality workout sessions versus it's very hard to remember the average ones. And the reason people won't know is because you don't remember them.
Yeah, exactly. And it just like, at the end of the day, you should be proud of yourself and know that like you did everything you could today, and like and you like squeezed everything you could out of your rag, like, or you've like filled up that glass and it's still overflowing with water. Like you gave everything you got, and like that's the feeling you want to have leaving the gym. And then like not just in the off season, like obviously during the season as well. But I think I really tend to focus more on that in the off season because it's easy to kind of get sidetracked when you're in the off season. And I think that's just why like some of the greatest players in the world, like I just keep seeing these videos of Crosby and I think it's amazing at what he's doing at his age right now. And like he's training like he's like the first year in the league. Like, and I don't think he's taking the game for granted, which I think is really cool. Like, and he has that mindset of A, he could lose his job at any point if he doesn't do this, and like B, like he has fun with it. Like he enjoys the game and he truly embraces that feeling of like, he knows he's putting in the work, and I mean, he's still seeing the results on the ice during the game. So yeah, it's cool. It's really cool to kind of, when you dive into it and kind of fully understand it a little bit. And I'm still learning. I learn every day about my feelings and emotions, and it doesn't stop. But I think when you get a good grasp on it, I think it's pretty cool. It's a good feeling.
That's awesome. Sweet. All right. Well, we'll wrap up the check-in for today, and
Yeah.
I want to kind of transition over into the tryout stuff, because I know like at the end of the day, when it comes to tryouts, there's no like perfect magic bullet. If there was, then everybody who tried out would make it, and then what would be the point of tryouts?
Right.
Right. And so the kind of first question I want to ask you is, especially when you are going into, because what you're basically doing is going into a tryout when it comes to training camp, how do you kind of think of handling that pressure? How do you maybe even just frame the situation in general? And you can look at it from the perspective of maybe when you're trying out for, maybe it was junior, like maybe NAHL or USHL, or how maybe you're thinking of it now, and kind of compare and contrast the two. I'm curious.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you, one, a lot has changed since then. Like my mindset of going into junior tryouts to pro tryouts, a little bit different. Maturity wise, I think is a huge thing. Understanding the situations, but like the junior tryouts for me was more of, one, I was undrafted. I was a free agent. I was just an invitee to the camps, and I was able to make the team off through those tryouts because I stood out, and I didn't try to stand out. I just like had the mindset of, okay, like I'm going to treat this like this is everything, because it is. I mean, you are trying out to make a team, and you have to change that mindset into like, what am I going to do to stand out? What can I do to separate myself from the guy next to me? And yeah, there might be some good players here. What's going to make the scouts or the coaches or the team and the management up top go, okay, we keep seeing that number, whatever, on the ice, and he's always around the net, or he's always hitting someone, or he's always, and you have to find that and be comfortable with it and be okay with it. And if that team doesn't necessarily like what you bring, so be it. Like you move on and you find your spot. And I think that like nowadays, sometimes kids try to go into these camps and tryouts, and they do too much and they overthink it, and it ends up kind of falling like into the snowball, and it kind of explodes at the end, and it's a negative result. Where I think if they just go in and stick to what they do best, they don't have to try to be spectacular. Because I'm telling you, if there's a good coaching staff and management, they will find you if you're doing the right thing. And so like when I went in, I wouldn't say I necessarily knew that at my age. Like I didn't know that. Now when I did go in, I was very humble, and I just went in and I said, I'm going to work as hard as I can and do the best that I can to try to show these coaches what I can do. And that was my mindset. And I just did what I did best. I had a pretty good showing. I didn't put up crazy amount of points, but I always had the puck on my stick, and I was confident, and I trusted in my game, and I trusted in myself that everything that I've worked for my entire life was going to pay off, or was going to work out, because I put in the work already. So there was like no pressure. It was just more of go out and enjoy it and have fun. And now I can say like, yeah, you get the nerves, and I think that's like exciting. You want to be nervous, and I think you don't truly care about the game if you're not nervous for a tryout or a camp or whatever it may be. Back in the day, like for me, it was just more of, I know my mindset going in was do your best and stick to what you do best, and know that you've done everything already up to this point. And if you're not having that, if you're having that doubt of, okay, like maybe I haven't done enough yet, well then I don't think you truly have done enough. Like that might be the realization, like, okay, maybe I can work harder to get better, or this and that. But for me, it was like, okay, I know I've put in the work, like I've done it. And then like going in, I was pretty confident in myself that I was going to show these coaches that I can make this team. And I think I had that little light switch flip a little early. I think it was more when I was playing AAA, which was right before juniors, obviously, and on my 18th year. And it was like, okay, like I have put in the work and I believed in myself. And that's kind of leading. Now I've grown on that, and I'm at the pro level now to where that's the exact mindset I have, but it's so much stronger. And it's this ability, then knowing that like I've put in a ton of work to get here. And it was like last summer going in and having the opportunity to go to development camp and work with the Flyer staff and what it takes to be a pro, and then going through the rookie series right before training camp. And like having that exposure and trusting myself that, like I put in, and I saw Scotty Scheffler say it not too long ago, and he got asked a question basically about his nerves. Like, are you nervous? And he's like, no, I'm never nervous, because I know that I put in the work, and I trust myself, and I trust my game, that if it veers off which way and I don't end up winning that tournament or having a good camp or whatever, but at the end of the day, I've known I've done the things I've needed to do to be the best I can be. And so be it if it doesn't work out. Rinse and repeat and move on to the next. But I think if you can kind of instill that, and that's a mindset that works for me. May not work for other people, but I think a lot of hockey players athletes can benefit off of that mindset of just believing and trusting that you've put in the work and the time. And I think you'll know right away if you have that slight hesitation of, okay, I don't know if I put in enough work. I think that's right there, the key indicator. Like, okay, now I know I'm not fully there yet, but I can be there because I just recognize the idea of recognizing that. So I think that's super important. That's kind of what I've carried out all the way up through juniors and into the pro life.
That's interesting. Mm-hmm. The way I always describe that exact mindset that you have is it's having like an input over output mindset. And the way I would explain that to somebody who doesn't know is whenever you go into a situation, there's the things that you can actually put into the situation, and then there's the things you get out. And a lot of times when people go into like a tryout or a game or any kind of like performance, you see this very common trend of, I want to control the output and I want to get a certain amount of goals. I want to make the team. I want the coach to notice me or like me. And the funny thing is that you want to use those things to influence your preparation, but the performance, you have to be able to step completely out of that output mindset, because you cannot control those directly. And it's such a frustrating thing for players because they think, oh man, well, I want to be able to control this. I want to score a certain amount of goals. But in reality, if we could, then we would just go out and get 1,000 goals a game, right? And that's the thing is, it can be just like you described. It's a freeing experience. It's not a bad thing to realize I can't control this, because the only real issue is thinking you have to control all the outcomes and the outputs.
Right. Yeah. And I kind of get this little example in my head is last year when I went to my first NHL training camp with the Flyers, and I went in thinking the entire summer before camp, I did everything. Like, I remember I did more than I've ever done before to get ready for this camp. Not only, like, obviously you want to do well and prove to the coaches and the staff that, yeah, you can play at the highest level in the world. But for me, I think it was more of like that self-confidence and that internal feeling of like, I put in all the work I could do. I've squeezed so much out of this summer. I've done everything. And I went in and I had zero expectations because, one, I didn't know what was going to happen at this camp, which I don't think is a bad thing, going in with no expectations, because then the results that I saw from that camp was something I never even honestly dreamed of. And we've kind of chit-chatted about it, but I was able to have 3 NHL preseason games out of it. And I got that experience of a lifetime of, okay, like, I'm like half, just with the preseason, like it's not my first NHL game, but it's like half of that. And like, I'm so close, and to be able to like experience that. And when the camp was done and over with and I was back down in Lehigh, and I remember sitting there talking to my coach, and he's like, how do you feel after camp? And I just kind of told him, I'm like, I'm proud of myself. Like, I'm really proud of myself. And he goes, you should be. And that was, for me, that was like the switch of like, I put in all the work and I saw the results, and I didn't care about the output, or I didn't care about the results, but it worked out in my favor. And I think that was the coolest part about it. And I know, because sometimes it doesn't work out and it sucks when you put in the work and it doesn't, but it's having the ability to, I think, recognize it and understand, like, okay, like, yeah, sometimes it isn't going to work out and it's not going to go your way, but just believing that if you keep working and if you truly want it, it will work out at the end, whatever way that may be or however it may work out. Yeah, I was fortunate enough to like have that experience and really like understand that. And yeah, I think you make a really good point there of like, you can't control the output, and you can't control the results, even though you want to. And yeah, I had a really good showing at training camp, and I scored some goals in the scrimmages, which I wasn't expecting to do. And like, it was just like a cool feeling to go through. And like, now having that second year coming up and being able to do this in a month, kind of the same mindset as, I mean, no expectations, but knowing that I can go in and I can do this, and we'll see what happens. And my goal is to make the team this year. And I think that's what every player's goal is when they try out for a team. So, yeah, like having that experience, I think, was truly cool. But I think having the recognition for it is even more substantial for your growth as a player.
I love that. And I want to highlight that point of expectation and kind of drill in on it, because a lot of times we hear it and it can kind of just go by us and we're like, oh, cool. Don't have an expectation. Oh, okay. Brendan sounds like he knows what he's talking about, so I'll do that. Right.
Yeah.
But the key distinction that I found whenever I teach a player this concept is that when you set an expectation, it matters to actually set an expectation at all, is because, okay, like, you need to have some kind of standard of, here's what I know I can do. But where the issue comes in is that we expect that we're going to be given something. And the second we go into a camp and we're like, oh, I'm going to be given this spot on this team. I'm going to have a whole bunch of goals. I'm going to get all these things and coaches are going to love me. The challenge is now what you've done is you've set this point up here of everything below this is a failure. And the problem is that throughout the camp, you're not going to instantly have all those things. It only happens at the end. And so it's more so understanding that, and you may want to even frame it differently, as you have a standard of what you put in, like your inputs, but setting an expectation low and allowing yourself to have that room to just perform and just play, as opposed to have to be perfect, I have to do X, Y, Z, because then that pressure kind of creeps its way back in again. Like, and then now you're right back in that place of, well, now I have to perform. Now I'm not good enough because I'm not getting the outputs.
Sure. Yeah. And like, I could come into this camp this year and expect to play in all the preseason games and expect to do what I did last year. But yeah, like you develop and creep that mind, or that pressure into it. And that will, I feel like, destroy you at times. It'll make you feel like you're like, what is going on right now? Like, nothing's going my way, nothing's working out. And like, those feelings are so hard to overcome, especially when like camps are so short and limited time. You only have a certain amount of time, a certain amount of ice time, a certain amount of off ice workouts to like prove yourself. And so, yeah, like, I wouldn't say that like going in with no expectations is like what I'm saying here. Is what more so is like, I have these just little, yeah, like that, set the bar so low that when I do exceed those, I'm able to build on that and to keep growing. And then next thing you know, you see, you're like, it's like the ladder, you're just going up and up and up and up, and you keep building on that. To whereas, you know, if I come in and I were to set it up like this year, you know, I want to play in the preseason games again, or I want to impress the coaches again, and I want to do this again, and like, I want to have the same testing result numbers. Like, realistically, it's not going to happen. One of those things is going to go sway, and it's not going to happen. And I think if you can just be very level-headed, and at the end of the day, you know, it all circles back to trusting in yourself and what you're able to put in. And yeah, really like dialing in that mindset of it's you, and like, you're here, and trusting yourself, and then like going after that goal and your dream. And yeah, like, defeat, you know, start like having an expectation and growing on it and then making that expectation bigger and then going from there and then like climbing that ladder, I think is super important. So yeah, you make a really good point, good example for young players, because it's not easy to do. And I think a lot of young players struggle with that now. And when they're able to key that in and dial it in, I think they'll notice a significant difference in their confidence, which is such an important piece to the game of hockey or in all of sports for sure.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I'm glad you said the confidence thing at the end, because a lot of times that's a super like paradoxical point of, well, how can I have low expectations and still be confident in myself? That doesn't seem like it aligns. But why it makes sense is because you can have a belief in yourself that you can do something versus an expectation that this will happen. And that kind of ties back to that point again of, you have to be able to let go of the idea, have total control of this thing, because confidence to me is not, oh, I'm going to get exactly what I want every single time I do something, but it's the ability to know I can handle anything that comes, and knowing, like you said, I've done everything I could. And that to me is, a player has to distinguish that, because if they didn't, like, you would go into this camp and be like, oh, well, I'm not confident in myself, right?
Right. Yeah, and it's like you look at Connor McDavid and the numbers that he puts up on a daily basis and in his games, and you're telling me that he's sitting there thinking, like, before the game, you know, all right, I'm going to get two assists tonight, or I'm going to have 3 goals, or I'm going to do this. Like, no, he has the belief in himself and he knows that he can do it, but his expectations going into the game is, all right, like, we need to win tonight because we need the 2 points, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to help my team win. And he knows that if he can do what he knows he can do, his team has a great chance of winning. And I think that's like a good example of showing kids, like, yeah, it's not having those expectations of I need to do this and like, or everything's going to go bad, but it's that ideal mindset of I know I can do it. If it doesn't happen, oh well, whatever, move on. Like, having the belief. And usually when you have that belief, I think another thing is you see other outcomes that you probably didn't even know that like you had or the ability to achieve. You achieve these different goals because you're so like, yeah, like level-headed, and you have that belief in yourself. And the next thing you know, you start seeing like, oh wow, like this is starting to happen now for me, and this is starting to happen in a good way. And like, now I'm getting more ice time because I'm doing this, and like now I'm having this I'm on the power play now, and like just so many things can happen, I think, from having that internal belief and not trying to overstress and overcomplicate it so much. And the process of, you know, when you're going in and trying to impress a coach or a management staff, yeah, it comes down to the belief in yourself and knowing that you can do this for sure.
I love it. Sweet. Well, I want to transition the convo a little bit into when you're going into a camp. I have some stuff that I'll go into after you, but when it comes to like preparing yourself, and obviously you do like you follow your actual core training systems, but when you do come up closer to the camp, do you have like a thought process of, you know, how you're preparing your mind, body, your skill set to make sure you get the most out of yourself, whether it comes to like, maybe you do some deloading work, maybe like when you get to the camp, you have a certain like routine you like to follow when you're at the actual game days or training. Like, what do you kind of do in that sense?
I think I really try to dial in what my body needs and what my mind needs. I think is two different things that I really try to focus on. And starting with the body, obviously you can go from anything, starting with sleep and nutrition, I think is getting your body right and getting what it needs pre-camp or pre-tryout or anything, dialing in your body and making sure that it's kind of like the input-output thing is where you're putting, like, you have to put in the work and you have to put the right food in your body and you have to get the right amount of sleep to make sure your body has the most energy it can have, the most nutrition and the most energy, all that, where it can be ready to go. And like, that's where I would say like I start at is about, even for me, like now, like a month, even though I've been doing it all summer, but like a month, I'll really like start to dial in like the sleep and nutrition and really start to get like a good feel for my body and where it's at. And, you know, like making sure that every day when I wake up, I feel real fresh and ready to go. And then when I'm, you know, in the weight room or whatever, like if you need a week off or you need a day off, listening to your body, it's not a bad thing. Like, I don't think you have to go in and be like, oh, if I miss a day, like we're a month out from camp or tryout, like it's going to hurt me. Like, no, listen to your body, understand, feel out your body. And if you need a day to just do yoga or stretch or this and that, and kind of dialing like your body in. So like overall, and then like your mindset of getting into that mindset of like, I like to do it like, this is my job, this is my life, which it is now for me. But I had that mentality back in juniors, and I had that mentality in college. This is my job. And if I want it to be my job for a long time, I need to make sure I'm mentally strong up here and ready to go at all times. And that may be, sacrificing some of the things that you don't want to give up, or, sacrificing free time, or missing a family function, or not being, going out with friends, or not going out on the weekends, or whatever it may be. Like, whatever works best for you and whatever you need to do to be ready. And it's different for everybody. Some people can still do all that. Like, they can, and props to them. But for me, I'm more of a person that I know I need to step away from people and different things and kind of get my mind right before I go into camp. And that's what works for me. Just find out what works for you, and see what you need to be ready to go come that time. And I think then when you get to camp, I think if you want me to go into that, when you're that's just kind of taking all those components that you just did, and then while you're there is kind of implementing it, and then like with full force, and kind of using all of that you just were doing and putting it into action at the camp, and making sure that you're recovering and you're still fueling your body and getting the right stuff, and you're getting the sodium that you need after your sweat. Like, there's just so many things we could sit here and go into, but it's kind of embracing that mindset of like, it's my job. I need to really do what it takes. And if I have to sacrifice some things or whatever it may be, but really like kind of fine tuning your body and your mind and getting ready to go. Like no one's going to stop you. Like, you're not going to let anyone get in your way.
Nice. Yeah, that makes sense. And so going into, let's say, and I want to kind of poke at this a little bit, is
Yep.
So do you follow like a deload type protocol, like right before the camp? Like, do you do anything specifically, like typically, like the way I recommend is like the week before any big camp? I always tell guys, like, you don't want to just do the same exact protocol like right up to the camp and then you just jump right in the next day. I'm curious, like, have you found that you just do continue your protocol all the way up, or is there kind of like a intentional shift, maybe like a few days out or anything like that you do?
Yeah. So, well, one, we're on the same page as our trainers. Like, they're really good at understanding our body, and they listen to us, which is a very important thing. And it comes down to communication, like being able to talk and express how you're feeling with your staff and your management. And if you're on your own, it's understanding, like, again, what your body needs. And for me, it's a couple weeks before, I think like 2 weeks before camp, it'll be more of like a deload week. And then the week before, you kind of start ramping up, like nothing crazy, but you're starting to, get your heart rate back up and kind of getting back into the swing of things. And then you kind of like work your way back into it. And yeah, like the workouts or the skates may not be something extreme, but it's enough to where you get like a good sweat, and it's kind of just like a maintenance kind of week. So you go in like your deload and then go back into like a maintenance, and then maybe like the last couple of days you'll hit like maybe like a hard one cardio session, just to kind of get that heart rate up and understand, like, because usually like training camps and all that and tryouts, they're pretty tough. Like, they usually push you because a lot of coaches like to see how you like to battle like the mental side of it when you're tired, and they push you and try to get you tired. So, and that kind of takes me to a whole nother thing, like training with that way in the summer. But like, that's what I try to get back to, is like understanding like the deload and then kind of ramping back up. And then you usually get like the weekend off before camp, or which I know some of the tryouts are on the weekend. So maybe it's like Thursday, Friday, or let's go Wednesday, Thursday. You're kind of smooth sailing. You're probably not doing much. You're saving your legs and getting ready to go, because realistically, like 1 or 2 days off isn't going to kill you right before you go out there. Like, it's not gonna, you've done the work already. Your body's not gonna be like, oh, you took 2 days off right before camp, like you're screwed now. Like, that's not gonna happen. So like for me, it's more of like right now we're kind of in like the peak, like we're getting up there and we're getting ready to go. And then we'll, in like 2 weeks here, we'll take like a whole week off. We won't even like, we'll just do like maybe some aerobic work to just keep your heart rate up a little bit, get a nice little sweat. But other than that, you won't touch a weight and kind of just smooth sail. And then like when you come back after that, you got about a week or two and you start to just slowly ramp up, like maintenance, making sure your body feels good and you're ready to go for your tryout or camp.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, and I'd be curious to know nuance. So obviously that's the case when you have like one camp you're prepping for, and that's your kind of focal point is like you can have that kind of 2-ish week like kind of ramp up style where you do a week of deload, then you do a week of ramping up, then kind of 2-ish days of kind of like total recovery so you can kind of hopefully peak out kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then what about if you, and maybe I'm curious to know if you have an answer for this, but what about if you have like multiple camps that you have to prep for? Have you ever dealt with that?
Not honestly, not really. I've gone from one camp to another one time, and they knew I was coming, so I like joined the camp midweek. So I was like kind of already like, yeah, like I went from one and then jumped into midweek to their camp. So I was kind of like already going. So I didn't really have like the whole like going from week to week, but I think it would come down to recovery and trying to make sure you can do whatever it takes to be ready to go again. Because one, like you go through one camp, your body's going to break down. You're going to be tired. You're going to be pretty banged up. Now it's about getting home or wherever you may be. Maybe it's the next hotel. Maybe you're going right to another camp. It's making sure that maybe you're getting out for a walk and just getting the body moving or stretching or rolling out or things like that. There's always little things that you can do to help enhance your, and that goes back to feeling out your body and what you need for sure. Going from camp to camp, it's got to be pretty tough, but there's got to be a point there where like you kind of flush whatever happened, good or bad. The last camp, I had a good camp. You can use that for sure. I'm not saying just throw it away, but you can use that. But even if you have like a bad camp, you kind of flush it, let it go. It is what it is, done and over with. Now let's focus on this one and crush this one. If you have a good camp, same thing. Like you still don't want to go in too high and be like, oh, okay, I crushed this camp. Now let's go crush this camp. But then like, boom, we just got into that and we talked about it. Kind of just staying level headed and having that good peace of mind of just knowing and understanding your job and your role and sticking to that and kind of being like the level headed and, not too high, not too low. I think that's a great mindset to have is you're going to go through a lot of peaks and valleys, but when you're there, when you're at the highs, don't stay there, because if you stay there, it'll eat you up. And then if you're too low, I mean, you'll keep going down. And I think if you can find that little happy medium, it's pretty good smooth sailing from there, and you're able to have a good, confident mindset for yourself. So yeah, from camp to camp, I think that would probably be my advice to anybody that I've learned.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and it's a weird nuance because I kind of deal with this when I work with guys a lot, where there's this challenge of you don't get to do like a proper peaking phase because you'll have like a camp and then maybe like 2, 3, 4, or 5 weeks later. So you can't really do like a proper prep and ramp up. And so it kind of like messes up the phases and all that stuff. And so what I've noticed is that the understanding of this is like a season in your life. And if you kind of think of your hockey career as like a bigger kind of like, let's say 20 years or whatever it's going to be. If you think of this as like every season is not going to be like that. I'm not going to have these like very sporadic camps forever, hopefully not at least. And kind of embracing that, okay, I might not be able to get the absolute most out of my training. I might not be able to get the most out of everything. And again, kind of going back to that mindset of looking at it from, I'm trying to have these kind of micro peaks where I kind of just get the most out of what my body has at that time, recover as much as I can, and then try to peak as quick as I can, as opposed to that kind of weird thing you do in the off season where it's like you're not really at like optimal performance. You kind of like
Mm-hmm.
slowly ramp up, load the body, and then you're like at that final point. So I
Mm-hmm.
think it's just understanding it's going to be more of when you have lots of camps, you're trying out for lots of teams, you just get ready
Sure.
to ride the waves. And
Yeah.
then on the other side, it's more of a be patient and ramp up and then be ready to be at your absolute best at the end, kind of like where you're at.
Yeah. And just thinking about like the ups and the downs is like, if you're going through, you have a gap of 2 weeks, maybe that week after camp, you're kind of just recovering. And then like the second week, you do 3 days of like good, solid, hard workouts or 3 good skates and like just get that feel good mindset of like, wow, the puck feels really good in my hands right now. Or leaving the weight room, you're like, oh, okay, like I feel good. Like nothing on my body hurts. I'm not sore. Like you're just feeling good about yourself. And I think if you can have the good connection between your mind and your body and like that good feeling of, yeah, like I feel good. I'm ready to go. Like the puck feels good on my stick or my skating feels good. I think that's, yeah, like you said, like just kind of understanding that you're going to go through these like peaks and valleys and nothing's going to, one day at the camp, you might feel more tired than the next. And that's just, that's okay. Like you're going to go through like those because you're going through these little ups and downs and these valleys. Yeah, compared to what I have in the opportunity where I'm kind of slowly ramping up, like climbing the roller coaster hill and getting ready to go at it. So yeah, you make a really good point. I think that's a good mindset to have going in for sure.
Got it. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
zooming in a bit into a little bit more into kind of tryouts specifically, like when you're actually in a camp or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the things that you notice? Like it could be even just one main thing
Mm-hmm.
that it's like a big mistake a player will like maybe not typically, but you see a lot of players make.
Mistake wise, I think it's doing too much, honestly. I think it comes down to doing too much and trying to do too much to stand out or too much to do that. And you'll start to see the pressure build up on someone when that happens. You'll see that they start to develop because things usually don't go your way. I think when you try to do too much. Now, I'm not saying you can't try. Like you're gonna try your best. You're gonna do your best at it. But if you're trying to, like for me, like I know that I'm not like the points guy. I'm not the goal scorer. So I wasn't gonna go out there and try to score. And because usually when you try to do that, you either like you force plays or you're trying to do too much, and you can see it. Like you can see a player that plays free on the ice. Like they're not thinking. They're just out there smooth sailing, skating around, and then you can see a player that's tense, and you can kind of, I would say like our age and the guys that I'm around, the older players, you can see the ones that are tense, and then the ones that are not, and it's easy to recognize. And I would say, yeah, like when you're trying to do too much and not sticking to your regimen and what you do best, and finding your niche, like your niche at the camp. Because like I said, at every level you go up, there's going to be a coach or a staff member or management that recognizes your game and how they may help their team. And I think when you go in and do too much, you're just building a ton of unnecessary pressure. And when you're doing too much, usually your expectations are way too high as well. And you have this expectation way up here, and you're never going to reach it. You're going to keep trying to reach, and you're never going to get it. So I would say, yeah, like that's the biggest thing I always see. And it usually translates to whatever it may be at the camp or the tryout. So you see that quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, and to
Mm-hmm.
simplify it down, the way I hear that is it's really just know who you are, know your identity, and
Mm-hmm.
trust that as opposed to thinking I have to try to make all these like super radical changes because what ends up happening, and I see this every time a player does this, where it's the overplaying because they think that, oh, I need to be something other than the strengths and the niche that I currently am. In reality, yes, you may have to change a little bit. Like if a team, the way I frame it is, if you have a coach who's like a super hard nosed coach, okay, well,
Mm-hmm.
the nuance to that is play your game, but have the intention of maybe not overplaying things. And when I say that, it's
Mm-hmm.
maybe don't try moves in certain scenarios. It's knowing those red
Right.
zones that we've talked about on the blue lines, right?
Right.
It's these little details that if a player is thinking about, okay, I know who I am, and I have to take a step back and think a little bit about the team. But I
Mm,
think the mistake you're saying is it's you think only about what the coach wants, only about the team, and you
yes.
lose yourself in that.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And if we take Torts' camp in Philly,
Yep.
and you can ask any hockey player, it's usually one of the toughest in the league, and that's the expectation. Every player going in knows that it's going to be tough, and it's really cool, especially last year for me, like being able to witness and see the older guys, like the more mature guys, the guys that have been around it. They like, yeah, like the one, even like the goal scorers, they stick to their game and their niche, and they dial that in, but then they add that component from the coach of what he wants. And, you know, Torts is known for being hard, and like he wants his players to play hard. And like you'll see guys like they'll play hard and they'll be like let's just use like TK, like Travis Konechny. I mean, he just got that mega deal for a reason. Like he deserves it because he's a hell of a player. He's a skilled player, but he totally buys into what Torts is putting out, and he embraces that. He knows he needs to be hard because that's his coach's style, and it does change from coach to coach, and you have to embrace that for sure. So yeah, you make a really good point, and like kind of, you know, opening that up and having the recognition there of you still have to understand like what job you have to do for sure, but it's how you incorporate that into your game, and making sure that you can still impress your coach and make your coach happy with the way and expectations that he wants you to be at and his team to be at. And then kind of, you know, put that into your game. And like I said, I think TK is a really good one at kind of showing that, he was a leader at the camp, and you could see it because he worked so hard, and like he's one of the best players on the team, and it shows. And yeah, it was like really cool to kind of watch him and have that experience of like seeing, you know, he can embrace that. So yeah, you make a really good point, and I'm glad we're able to kind of dissect that a little bit and show that understanding.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And
Mm,
and these are the details, right? It's you can understand a concept. I remember listening to a lot of hockey podcasts where you can tell the person they get it on almost like a subconscious level. And I
mm,
think that's kind of where you're at now is like you definitely get it on a subconscious level, but it's very hard for players who don't get it to listen to somebody, for example, like listening to Gretzky talk about like how to have better IQ.
mm,
Literally listening to Gretzky talk about improving IQ is almost like 0% help because
mm,
he got it at such a high degree that yes, he can execute it and it exists in his mental software, but
mm,
he doesn't have the software to really teach it. And so that's the challenge is like it's when you go into a tryout, you can hear somebody say, "Oh yeah, okay, just play your game." And then you're like, "Okay, cool. What does that look like?" And then it's that example you just said. Now you're talking about a guy who's, you know, making millions of dollars, and it comes from these little tweaks and adjustments in their game. But if a
mm,
player doesn't, this is what when somebody says, "Oh, what does it mean to do the work to work on your mental game?" It's
mm.
not just meditate, it's not just
Yeah.
visualize. It's go like of course, like stuff like that is always going to be important if you want to have a mental part of your game when it comes to
Mm,
focus or, you know, developing that side. But then there's the mental game of how do I develop myself? How do I adjust little intentions that I set? How do I change the little habits that I have? And it's not just habits of do I stretch before the game or do I roll out,
yeah.
right? It's
Right.
it's again, it's like hopefully if you're listening to this and you're at a pretty high level, like you know you should be doing it. If you're not, start doing it. But
Yeah.
it's the other side of but also think about okay, what is it actually going to take to move up levels? And that's why like I call
Mm,
this the next level hockey podcast. It's
right.
because you actually want to think about like let's not bullshit yourself. And I'm talking to somebody listening right now. Like let's not
Mm,
bullshit yourself that you're going to try show up to this tryout and hard work is the only thing. It's take these little details, actually go and do like a writing session, journal down all these details
mm,
and say, what about my game do I need to bring? And maybe what is a little nuance about this coach or this organization? And
mm,
think about that and how, yes, I could just maybe if you're a skill guy and you like to just shoot all the time, well, look to put yourself in more battle scenarios, because that might be the thing that, if we're talking NHL level, that could be the thing that earns you going from an AHL to an NHL contract, right? Like it's
Right.
it's those little things that you're doing right now that I'm pretty confident are going to get you in that spot. Like, what do you think about that? That was a bit of an emotional rant for me, but
Yeah, no. I think you nail it. And like making that more personal to myself is, yeah, like taking my game, and then that was like the step this year, was taking my game, understanding, okay, this is my game, and then what is Philly looking, what do they need and what do they want out of their players? And it's communicating to the staff and understanding, like, you may not know going in, you may not have an idea if this is, you got an invite a week before the tryout or whatever, like you may not know anything about the team or the program or whatever. So it's never bad to ask a question, or to ask, like, hey, like, what do you think, like, what are they looking for? What are you looking for out of a player? Like, they'll probably have way more respect for you than not. And they know that you want to be better and you want to get better, which makes you coachable. Every coach nowadays, you'd be shocked at, like, yeah, that kid's a great player, but he's not coachable. Or this kid is an average player, but he's so coachable that he listens. And like, they want kids and men that, and girls and gals and females that want to grow and be coachable, and like they don't want to just sit there and listen to some kid or some whatever like say that they're the best in the world. Like, it's being able to have that adjustment and that right mindset of, yeah, like taking your game and like having that little tweak and like developing it. And like, I always look at like a web, like the little webs you used to make in school, and like you kind of stem off of it. Like, you're in the middle, you're this player now, like, what can I add here to make me better? And then what can I add here? And then like, when you have all these different parts, now you take them and like add on to those, and then it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's how you grow as a player. And that's how you grow as a person too, as well, in life. And it's always learning and being coachable and understanding that you can always be better than the day before. And so, yeah, I think that was a big thing for me that this year that I was able to do throughout the season. I saw my game continue to grow. And then, yeah, like, especially going into this year, like I just talked about it, like I want to work on my scoring this year. Like, that's just one of the pieces of the web that I want to grow on. And then when that hopefully comes and I figure, and I get that all dialed in, there's the next part of it, and I can keep growing on that. And you can do that at tryouts, and you can do that at anywhere. I think once you have that good understanding of it, yeah, it's definitely super important.
yeah. And I think that'll honestly be a whole podcast about that topic of how to kind of build out that web, because I pretty much have exactly the same like philosophy that I'll teach guys. Like, I have like diagrams all around it. And I think what's really cool is when you do start to think about the idea of being coachable. And I think this is just important for any player to really like absorb this principle, is aren't coachable. And when I say coachable, it means somebody can say something to you and you listen to it, and then you try to take it and apply it in your game. If you are not doing that right now, you have to understand you have an infinitely complex game in front of you when you play hockey. And there are millions of different little nuances about the game that you may think, oh, it's simple. It's just, I just get pucks deep. I just get pucks on net, because that's what every hockey player is told to say in interviews, right?
Yeah.
But when it really comes down to it, it's, you have to be able to accept the fact that you don't know all of the nuances, and being able to hear somebody say, you should probably start to think about when you enter the zone, look for this other option. And being coachable is saying, ooh, okay, got it. I'm actually going to go and run with this, as opposed to saying, oh, coach didn't give me enough detail, so now I'm just, I don't understand, so I'm just going to leave it and I'm not going to bug him, right? It's actually, and you've pointed this out in the past podcast too, is you go and ask the coach, hey, like, where do I sit? Hey, what can I actually do in this scenario? And not just like, if you get a generic answer, kind of like we've even like done with each other here, is like, if you notice like, ooh, that was a little bit like just broad, it's like, well then, and then if you don't know, go and do the research to figure out those little tweaks.
Sure. Yeah, and like it comes down to the communication and understanding, and yeah, like having those talks and really trying to take in that information and soak it in, and understand how they're thinking, and understand why they're telling you this, and what their initiative is behind it. Like, why are they telling you this? And instead of taking in, maybe being like, well, what's he talking about? That doesn't make sense. Or taking it like, okay, I still don't understand it, but I could see why. Or maybe having like just that little bit, even though you may not understand it, like having that positive, optimistic side of that conversation, and understanding like, okay, he's definitely trying to help me and make me a better player. Now, like, take this information. If you still don't know, go and talk, have that conversation. But then, like, yeah, being able to soak it in and understand, like, they're just, most of the people, I would say, in hockey and in sports, they're not there to sit there, and they're not going to try to F you over. Like, they're not there to, like, I'm going to tell him one thing so he does this and mess up. Like, they're not there because, one, that they're going to lose their job because that's just how it's going to work. But they're there to help you, and they want to make you better. And if you can have the mentality, and I'm not going to say I'm not guilty of it, because it's hard. Like, it's a hard thing to understand that maybe these players, or, you know, my coach, and he was an old player, like, the games have changed and you might think differently, but that's okay. You're allowed to think differently, and that's where you're able to have those conversations and be an adult about it. And it helps you grow that maturity level as well. And then comes down to being very coachable, and the coaching and the staff and everybody will respect you a whole lot more for that. Them finding out that you've been mother effing them behind their back about this because you didn't agree with it, and it's not a good look. And yeah, I think if you can really focus on that, and you're just going to see a lot more strides in your game, and you're going to see a lot more results, and from every aspect of off the ice with your staff, and then on the ice as well.
I love it. Sweet. Well, there's a couple things I want to touch on, then we'll wrap up for today. But the last thing I want to ask is just in terms of, if you're thinking about what you want somebody to really take away from this, and they're going into a tryout like pretty soon. I'll also offer kind of my thinking on this as well. But what stands out to you is, I want a player to take this away and really have this as like a core memory from this podcast.
I could say it in a short little saying, is be yourself and be confident in yourself. And I think that's what it truly comes down to. And it's so hard. It's so it's cliche to say that, right? And we've kind of broken down the ways to be confident and the ways to trust and believe in yourself. But I think if we're like going and overviewing this whole podcast, I would say like, yeah, like you truly have to understand and have that belief and dial in that no matter what it is, like you can do this and you can get there, and you've put in the work. And if there's any sort of hesitation or doubt in there, I think that's what we've talked about it. That's like the trigger of like, I'm starting to grow as a person and a player, that I've developed this mindset where I can recognize that I'm not doing the things that I need to do, and it'll truly help you develop into a mentally stronger player in person if you're able to sit there and recognize and then dial it in and say, okay, like I am the person I am, or I am the player that I am because of these things, and truly focusing on that and like dialing those things in and having that belief in yourself that there's not a single person that's going to stop you from getting there and achieving that goal. And you're going to do whatever it takes. And we've, like I said, we've broken down all that already, but I think those are like the key points I would say from anybody from here is like truly go in and be confident in the person that you are and the player that you are.
I love it. And just to stack onto that point, I think one core thing I really want everybody to really absorb is you are going into a tryout and pushing yourself and challenging yourself. You're doing something where you don't have to expose yourself to this challenge. And I think it's important to kind of be able to step back and just acknowledge that, hey, I actually am taking a risk. I actually have the courage to go do this. And I know lots of other guys go to tryouts too. It's not like the craziest thing, but it's saying, look, I'm going and putting myself out there. I'm taking on this challenge. And I know that I'm not guaranteed to make this team. I can't control everything. But if you put everything you have into prep, you show up and you actually trust in yourself, you actually take action on the stuff we laid out to do. You should be actually proud of yourself, not just like good job and then be mad after, but actually say, I know I did everything, and then take whatever happens, whether it works out, you make the team, whether you don't, be able to be honest with yourself. Here's what worked, here's what didn't. I'm going to watch the film, I'm going to talk to the coaches, and no matter what, you're either going to win or you're going to learn. And if for all the guys who are in the identity like programs of any kind, we always know like anything that Kobe says essentially ends up being said in one of our conversations. And that was like the biggest takeaway I hope everybody can have for me is like, you're going to go into this situation, you're going to win and you're going to get the outcome you want, or you're going to learn from it and get closer to getting it next time.
Mm-hmm. There's no losing with it because it's not, yeah, you're growing as a player and you're learning from it and you're taking it in, and that's the maturity part of being able to grow and understanding that, yeah, everything's not going to work out in your way, but how are you going to grow from it and learn and change your ways, or what can I do better next time, and then implementing that and applying it the next time around, and yeah, you'll start to see those results big time.
I love it. Well, Brendan, thanks for being on, man. This has been an awesome conversation, and I'll see you on the next one.
Yeah, thanks, Preston. I appreciate it.
Of course.